Hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 15, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. I need a shave, need a haircut too. So, and again, remembering the instructions, he triggered the throttle wide open and, to his surprise, the screw shaft disappeared a foot into the ground in a matter of seconds with barely a tug. Continuing down as he maintained the open throttle and spewing soil in an almost perfect circle, a foot in diameter about the hole. The sound of the revving engine comparable to that of his line trimmer. You beauty. An hour and a dozen holes later, Clyde had no doubt in his mind whatsoever that he was more than proficient with it. Now all he had to do was fill in the holes. Then he would return to the cemetery to carry out his experiment and, of course, clean up the sisters' grave sites. Then he remembered that he hadn't paid a visit to the funeral directors. It had completely slipped his mind. No matter. It wasn't that important and could do it another time. Perhaps later this afternoon if time allowed. Placing the auger in the back shed, he then removed the muffler from the line trimmer. Checked and found there was plenty of fuel in the tank. He gathered his earmuffs, safety goggles, roll of masking tape and, after locking the back door from whence he had entered the house on his return, he drove to the cemetery. Parking in the exact same spot as before, he headed to Charles MacArthur's site without a hiccup, noticing as he did so that there wasn't a living soul to be seen anywhere. Wasting no time starting the line trimmer and taping the throttle wide open, then walking away and leaving it to rattle on as the vibration danced it gingerly about the surface of the patch of bare soil where it rested. By the time he returned to it, he reckoned there was every chance it'd be half a metre away from its initial resting place. It wasn't. After distancing himself near 100 metres and hearing nothing, he returned to find that it had described a crescent moon, a metre long if it was a centimetre. Any further and it would have come to rest against the face of the opposing granite encasement. It didn't matter, of course. It was just an observation. Satisfied, he rid the throttle of the masking tape, turned the line trimmer off and made his way to the sisters' gravesite, only to discover when he reached it that something was different. But what that wasn't instantly recognisable. Shrugging his shoulders, he placed the line trimmer on the ground and put on the safety glasses and earmuffs, his eyes constantly on the move, scanning the graves as he tried to figure out what was different, continuing to do so as he picked up and started the line trimmer. But still he drew a blank. Not wanting to step onto the graves out of respect for the sisters, he walked a narrow berm of earth that separated the two graves where, upon reaching the headstones, he began to cut the weeds using a sighing motion, careful to keep the nylon cord away from the soft sandstone face of the two headstones for fear of marking them. And it was then that he noticed what was different. The two headstones, once straight and true, were now at a lean and shorter. And where before the earth had been flush with the faces of the two headstones, now was a narrow hollow trench, as if someone or something had gripped the top of the two stones and worked them to and fro, then pushed them down into the soil, perhaps 6 inches. How strange, he thought. Continuing with his work, his mind was flooded with possible causes. Vandals was the first consideration. But if the soft stone had been worked in such a way, surely it would have broken. Kangaroo at rest could possibly push the stones back, but that wouldn't account for the stones being pushed down. Soft soil and the weight of the stones, perhaps. Possibly, but highly unlikely. So what else was there? Their father, that's what. The bastard had warned me yesterday, and this is another warning. Son of a bitch. But if it was him, why so subtle? I mean, he's a mongrel. so why not smash the stones to smithereens if he wanted to get the message across? He shrugged. It had taken barely 10 minutes to tidy up the 2 graves, and about half that time for Clyde to write the 2 stones and tamp down the soil. He had thought of raising them, but he didn't want to run the risk of damaging them, no matter how well his intentions or how careful he would be. Pleased with the result of his work, he looked around for a tuft of dry grass to brush off the green remnants of the weeds the line trimmer had spattered on the 2 headstones. Spotting exactly what he was after near an exposed root of the apple tree. With the soil surrounding the sisters' graves reasonably soft and friable, he had expected the soil under the tree to be likewise, but it was anything but. More like concrete it was, and the easy extraction he had anticipated turned into a wrestling match that had had him grunting and groaning and cursing under his breath. "God damn it," he cursed. "Come out, for fucking Christ's sake, you frigging rotten, stubborn bah!" Cut short as it did, and to the ground he fell, hard on his backside. "Bastard! You bastard!" he repeated, and it was then that he heard a loud creak that was instantly followed by another sound, like that of crunching a fresh apple but amplified 100 times. And when he looked up, and thankful that he did, he saw and just managed to roll away from a large branch that came hurtling down, then impacted the spot he had just vacated with an almighty thud. The vibration of the impact coursing through his body and prompting him to mutter, "Jesus Christ!" With his heart in his mouth, he just sat for a moment or two staring at what could have ended his life. In the blink of an eye had he not heard it give way, and only then did he stand and brush himself down, surprised that the tuft of grass was still gripped in his right hand. "Next time," he said, "I'll bring a brush." Leaving the cemetery with plenty of time up his sleeve, he decided he might as well drop in and have a word with Mr. Braithwaite or son. Less than 10 minutes later he was talking to both of them, although it was Mr. Braithwaite Sr. who did most of the talking. He reminded Clyde of Boris Karloff. "I promise you, this will be a thriller." His son Bud Abbott, of Abbott and Costello fame. Both were dressed in black shoes, black trousers, white long-sleeved shirt and black tie, clean-shaven and without a hair out of place, which was easy for Mr. Braithwaite Sr. because he was all but bald. He had answered Clyde's opening question without hesitation, saying that the lawn cemetery had been open for business, so to speak, in the autumn of '68, and yes, Victoria MacArthur was indeed buried there. He had then asked Clyde had he made arrangements for his own interment, going on to say that there was no better time than now to do so. Clyde agreed with his logic and accepted a glossy brochure to peruse at his leisure, thinking how little difference there was between buying one's final resting place and a new car, right down to the options available. But just as he was leaving, Clyde said, "Oh, and one other thing while I'm here." After dinner, Clyde busied himself placing everything he would need in the laundry, ticking off the list he had prepared yesterday as he did so, and checking it one last time when he had finished, placing the 2 cans of fuel outside close to the back door to be on the safe side last of all. Tomorrow night he would drive his car to the rear of the house and load up. A safeguard against nosy neighbours and their inquiring minds. Clyde tossed and turned in his sleep that night, so worried he was, waking several times in a lather of sweat, heart racing, eyes wide, almost convincing himself on one such occasion to get up and get the bloody thing over and done with, only to flop back onto the pillows and quickly regain sleep, troubled as it was. At 4:30 he woke again, but this time he needed to go to the toilet. Nothing unusual about that these days. What was unusual was that he couldn't for the life of him recognise where he was. He had gone to bed in his bedroom, and in bed he was when he awoke several times before, but now nothing made sense to him. The bed he had just now vacated was no longer there, nor the bedside cabinet, double wardrobe across the room, 2 chairs at the west wall. And what had happened to the bedroom door? And what is that light coming in through the windows? Thinking that he was dreaming, he bit his lower lip hard enough to draw blood. The result instantaneous, the pain short and sharp, the taste of blood unmistakable. This can't be a dream, he muttered. So where the hell am I? Noticing the door to the ensuite, he made for it. But what was this surface he was walking on? It wasn't the carpet that should be there, for this was smooth and slippery, like polished wood, steel or stone, and as cold as ice on his bare feet. Suddenly he felt very cold and he shivered, folding his arms across his chest and vigorously rubbing the palm of both hands on the cotton sleeve of his pyjama top in a futile effort to warm himself. "This is crazy," he said. "This can't be happening." Continuing to rub as he tiptoed toward the ensuite, he was inadvertently drawn to the light streaming through the bedroom windows, so bright that he shielded his eyes with a hand. But to see anything but the light was as impossible as it was to gain warmth from his hands. Stepping into the ensuite, the door slammed shut behind him with the noise of a shotgun blast. His hands going from his sleeve to his ears, in the split second his heart skipped a beat, and he flinched dramatically, the sound seemingly to ricochet off the tiled walls as he cowered, unabating, on and on and on, as if it would never stop, so loud that his scream, "Stop!" was lost to it. When it did stop, 10, 20 seconds later, but like an eternity to Clyde, he wasn't in the ensuite anymore. Instead, he was lying in his bed, only it wasn't his bed, and someone was looking down at him, and that someone was a stranger with cruel intent in his eyes. "No," he muttered. "No, no, no, no." But the stranger said, "Yes, yes, yes." And to the left side of the stranger was Sandy, and he was nodding, "Yes, yes, yes." And to the right of the stranger stood his father, weeping and shaking his head. "No, no, no." "What does it mean?" he asked Sandy. And Sandy said, "I think you know what it means, Clyde." And Sandy was right, for he did know what it meant. "This is my future, isn't it? If I desecrate the grave, this is what I'll wake up to, isn't it?" Sandy and the stranger nodded. "I'll have nothing, won't I? I'll be able to see the light through the window, but I won't be able to see anything, will I?" Sandy nodded, and the stranger licked his lips. "And the noise will be the sound of my cell door closing, won't it?" They both nodded. "And I'll cower and clasp my hands to my ears, won't I? And I'll be cold and afraid. And when I die, I'll die a pauper and nobody will miss me. Isn't that right?" But Sandy and the stranger were gone. "Father," Clyde said, "what should I do?" And his father, eyes dry and smiling, said, "Do what you think is right, my son. For if you don't think about the future, can you live with that too?" "No," he replied. "Then there's only a chance that you'll be damned if you do. But if you don't, you'll be damned for certain." "I will, won't I?" And his father nodded. "Can I wake from this nightmare now, Father?" But his father was gone. He already was. The time 4:30. And not only did Clyde need to go to the toilet, but he also needed to see what damage he had done to his right lower lip. "My God," he mumbled, draping his legs over the edge of the bed. Was that a nightmare, or was that a nightmare? Considering the restless night he had had, Clyde wasn't the least bit surprised that it was 9:16 when he awoke. Nor did he care. In fact, he yawned as he rolled onto his left side and yawned again as he closed his eyes. To hell with it, he thought. Might as well while away the time in bed for all the good it'll do me to be up and about worried sick about what I'm going to do tonight. There'll be enough time to do that anyway. But all he managed to do was snooze, and even then his eyes were open longer than they were closed. Half an hour later, resigned to the inevitable, He cast aside the bed covers and grumbled, "What's the point?" 5 minutes later he was in the kitchen, but except for putting on the jug and slotting a single piece of white bread into the toaster, he did little else. Usually he had a bowl of cereal and 2 slices of toast for breakfast, but he was so full of trepidation that he doubted he'd be able to stomach any food at all. He was probably being optimistic with 1 slice of toast, but he thought he should have at least give it a try. And who knows, once he had a little in his stomach he might feel like a little more. But as he nibbled on the piece of toast as he waited for the tea to draw, he quickly realised he had no appetite whatsoever and placed the barely eaten slice on the plate. Maybe later on. But at least the tea was good. It always was. And he felt a little better because of it. Not a lot, but a little. How he wished he had something to calm him down. Perhaps I could pop into the chemist and buy something over the counter, he mused, sipping his tea. Tell the pharmacist I've been feeling apprehensive of late, and could he or she recommend something? Yes, I'll do that. Do it now, as a matter of fact. Entering the chemist, he straight away noticed Sandy sitting on one of the 3 chairs to his far left, probably waiting for a prescription to be filled. He thought, making his way toward him. "Morning, Sandy," Clyde said, taking the chair to his immediate right. "Morning, Clyde," Sandy replied. "You need a script filled too, do you?" "No, I'm feeling anxious, so I thought I might be able to buy something over the counter to calm me down." Looking around to make sure no one was in earshot and satisfied there wasn't, Sandy looked at Clyde, then whispered, "You're going ahead with it, aren't you?" Clyde nodded. "When?" "Being careful too," Clyde whispered. "Tonight. Late tonight." "Jesus, Clyde, I sure wish you'd change your mind." "And I wish you'd change yours," Clyde was thinking. But he said, "I can't do that, Sandy. And if you were in my shoes, you'd probably do the same thing." Maybe, maybe not, Sandy thought as he looked around. Then, "But I sure as hell wouldn't want to be in your shoes when you get caught. That's for sure." A wry smile on his face, Clyde said, "I wouldn't want to be in my shoes either, when it comes to that." With emphasis, Sandy said, "Then don't do it, for Christ's sake. Come on, Clyde, for the love of God, don't do it." Folding his arms across his chest, head lowered, Clyde said but 3 words that put pay to the subject once and for all. "I have to." "Sandy," a woman's voice said, "your prescription is ready." After paying for his script, Sandy stood before Clyde, then said lightheartedly, "You're going to invite me back to your place for a cup of tea, considering it might be the last time you'll be able to do so?" Clyde smiled and nodded his head. "Give me a couple of minutes and I'll be right with you." The pharmacist, Alan Price, who reminded Clyde of Harrison Ford, suggested several things: valerian, Sir John's wort, vitamin B, adding that it was only the vitamin B that didn't have a sedative effect but, unlike the others, would need to be taken regularly over an extended period before any change could be noticed. Clyde bought a bottle of Mega B capsules and a packet of valerian for later on, assuming, of course, there would be a later on. Because Sandy had walked to town, Clyde had a passenger for the short trip home, a distance of half a kilometre where not a word was spoken. Clyde had expected Sandy would go on and was relieved when he didn't. Nor did he say anything once seated at the kitchen table as Clyde busied himself brewing a pot of tea. Nor did that change when Clyde joined him at the table, a mug of tea before each. In fact, the only sound as they sat opposite each other was the crinkle of the tobacco pouch as Sandy removed a small gathering of strands in preparation to rolling a smoke. But once Sandy lighted his cigarette, Clyde broke the silence by asking, "What was Alma's reaction to the money, Sandy?" Sandy smiled, drew on his cigarette, then said, "I thought she was going to pass out on me for a second or two. I did. Then when she clasped her hand to her heart, I thought she was having a heart attack. I tell you, Clyde, she scared me, she did." So I take it she was happy then. Over the moon she was, making plans now to visit her sister in England. Good for her, Clyde replied. Are you going with her? No, not me. Don't like to fly. Me either. Following a brief pause, Clyde asked, so if Alma is going to England, are you going to treat yourself to something special? Haven't thought about it, to tell you the truth, Sandy replied. And besides, there's really nothing I want. It's like that when you get older, isn't it? When I was young, I wanted all sorts of things but couldn't afford them. And now that I can, I don't want them anymore. Still, it's a good feeling to know you have the money at your disposal if by chance something takes your fancy. Don't you agree? Absolutely. There's nothing like having money in your pocket, especially if you can spend it without worrying how the next bill is going to be paid. After sipping his tea, Clyde said, oh, by the way, I sent the cheque off for the radar unit yesterday, so with any luck I'll have it by the end of next week. You might not be here then, Clyde, Sandy commented with a hint of sarcasm. It would have been easy for Clyde to suggest to Sandy that he'd give it a rest, but he didn't, saying instead, I'll be here, don't you worry about that. But I am worried, my friend. Worried that the next time I see you, you'll be behind bars. Funny. No, not funny. But strange you should mention that. Because I had a nightmare earlier this morning about being in jail. Aha, Sandy exclaimed. It's an omen, is what it is. You're probably right. And you're still going to go through with it. I am, because it's the right thing to do. And besides, Clyde thought, the sisters have paid handsomely for the job to be done. Yes, well, that may be so, but I still think you're nuts for doing it. After relighting his cigarette, and how, may I ask, are you going to do this idiotic thing? Standing, Clyde said, follow me to the laundry and I'll show you. Sandy wasn't surprised at what he saw lying on the laundry floor. For if there was one thing he knew for certain about Clyde, was that he didn't do things by halves. And he knew it was probably a silly thing to ask Clyde if he knew how to operate the auger. But he asked nevertheless. Oh sure, practice in the backyard until I operated blindfolded, I did. And Clyde's plan, he thought, no matter how much he was against it, was ingenious, although he wasn't surprised that it would be. There was, however, one thing he thought might be beyond Clyde's strength, and that was moving the ledger. For if any of the others he had seen at the cemetery were any indication, then the one on Charles MacArthur's grave would more than likely weigh half a ton, maybe more. So he said, you sure you're going to be able to move the slab on that grave, Clyde? I can see you have a crowbar, but do you honestly think you'll be able to set it aside by yourself? I don't know, Sandy. I think I'll be all right once I move the slab away from the encasement edge. But moving it those first few inches will be the biggest hurdle. Looking at Sandy, he asked, do you have any ideas? For if you do, I'd sure like to hear them. But nothing came to mind straight away, and Sandy doubted if it would. No, I'm sorry, Clyde. I can't think of anything. Clyde could, but he wasn't about to beat a dead horse. Never mind, I'm sure I'll manage to do it one way or another. Yes, you probably will, Sandy thought. So what else can I come up with to persuade him not to do it? Back in the kitchen and seated at the table, Sandy continued to pick away at his mind in a vain attempt to come up with an idea. But except for a breaking of a finger, arm or leg, he got nowhere. And besides, if one of those three did happen, Clyde would do it once he was well and able again. For his mind was made up and nothing was going to change it come hell or high water. Sandy left Clyde's house close to midday. He had suggested they go fishing, but Clyde wasn't in the mood, his mind elsewhere. Sandy, however, was in the mood and planned to do exactly that after lunch. The therapy, he hoped, would ease his conscience. He wanted to help Clyde and he knew he should. But the thought of desecrating a grave, even the grave of one so vile, weighed heavily on his conscience. So he could well imagine how he would feel if we were to do exactly that. Then there was Alma to consider. It was all right for Clyde because he was a master of his own destiny and answerable only to himself. But not so Sandy. If Clyde went to jail, he left only friends behind. But if Sandy went to jail, he would leave behind his wife of 42 years, and his son and daughter and grandchildren. Yes, indeed, Sandy had a lot to lose by comparison. So why did you wait until now to tell me all this? Alma asked over lunch. Because I didn't think Clyde would do it. That's why. And now he is and you're worried, right? Sandy nodded but didn't say anything. I can understand that, my love. Just like I can understand why he's doing it. Incredulous, Sandy said. Alma, you surprised me. I was expecting you to breathe fire and brimstone the very moment I told you about it. Alma smiled and said, Don't be daft, Sandy. Besides, I didn't say I agreed with what he's going to do, but I do understand why. Fact is, I had a strong feeling that Clyde would do something after I read the sister's writings. Did you? Sandy said. Be damned if I did. Matter of fact, Clyde had to prompt me before the penny finally dropped. Maybe you knew all along, but you didn't want to admit it. Maybe. Anyhow, he's doing it tonight and there's nothing I can do to stop him. Then that's that, isn't it? Yes, I guess it is, Sandy said with resignation. And with that said, Sandy went fishing. Ever since Sandy had left, Clyde had been trying to think of a way to move the ledger those few precious inches without busting his gut. He briefly entertained the idea of going to the cemetery, wrecking bar and hammer in hand, to have a practice run in broad daylight, but then dismissed it as being too risky. Using a hydraulic jack and length of timber to push the slab sideways was out because it would be physically impossible to hold the two and operate the jack at the same time, as it would be to pull the slab in conjunction with a length of rope girdling it. Yet the jack stuck in his mind for some reason, but be damned if he could reason why. Then it dawned on him. Sandy's presence, and possibly the vitamin B, although he doubted it, had had a calming effect, and with it Clyde had felt hungry and had wasted no time in preparing 2 cheese and tomato sandwiches, eating the first as he waited for the tea to draw. But after taking the first bite of the second sandwich and watching it down with several sips of tea, he suddenly had a lucid image in his mind's eye of the slab and headstone. A light bulb moment, and he exclaimed, That's it, by Jove, that's it. Shaking his head in admonishment for his stupidity, he said, You've been looking at the forest without seeing the trees, you bloody idiot. You don't move the slab to the side, you move it forward, lengthwise. And the more he thought about it, the more it made perfect sense. Gone was the real possibility of the slab falling off the encasement, a dreaded thought that had popped into his head time and time again. And he wouldn't need to move the slab more than 2 feet forward, a real time saver when time was of the essence. And it should take far less time to manoeuvre it forward into place once the deed was done. At least in theory, anyway. Now it was only a matter of retrieving the jack from the rear shed. Less than 5 minutes later, the jack was biding its time on the laundry floor along with everything else. 2 minutes later, Clyde was seated at the kitchen table, sipping tea and at a loss as to what he could do to keep himself busy. 10 minutes later, he was spraying the first bottle of weeding feed over the backyard lawn, and that's when he heard the noise. His first thought was that it was one of the local thumpers cruising along Lister Street, aggravating to be sure, but tolerable because it would soon pass. But the closer he worked toward the rear of the house, the louder the noise. So unless the moronic imbecile had parked its car for some reason, then someone else nearby must have a stereo blurring out, or a bloody spared no expense home cinema, Clyde hissed. God damn you, Charlie fucking Jessup. Following a quick glance as the remaining contents of the weed and feed bottle and discovering it was all but quarter full, Clyde decided to finish off before confronting his noisy neighbour. But by the time that had happened, perhaps 3 or 4 minutes, The noise had increased beyond all reason and Clyde was spitting chips. So without hesitation, he shot down the ball pump and stormed his way, fists clenched, teeth gritted, eyes narrow, towards Charlie's place, hell-bent on taking him to task, and may God have mercy on his miserable soul. Upon reaching his front gate and opening it, the noise was so obscene that Clyde was tempted to bid a hasty retreat to the back shed and don his earmuffs, but he plugged his ears with his little fingers instead, noticing as he did so that he wasn't the only one who found the noise unsettling, for there was more people standing in the street than Clyde had seen at any one time in the past 7 months of residence. "See what your fucking noise has done," Clyde yelled, stomping across the bitumen of Turpentine Street, his own words loud and clear in his head but slightly muffled, as was the noise booming out of Charlie's house. Reaching Charlie's front gate, Clyde unplugged one ear in order to open it, replugging his ear straight away once he did, then kicking the gate wide and stepping through, jumping forward as the gate canted off the top fence railing and closed itself automatically with a clunk that was barely audible to Clyde, but would have been bone-jarring if it had not been for the noise. Reaching the front door, Clyde reluctantly unplugged his ears and began to hammer away with fisted hands, yelling, "Open this door, Charlie. Come on, Charlie. Open this fucking door, goddamn you." But the sheer volume of the incessant thump was all-powerful and Clyde doubted that his demands had been heard. "Charlie, Charlie, Charlie," he persisted, his fist unrelenting as the noise, but the pounding thuds all but lost to it. Thump, 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 thump. "Open this fucking door, you fucking son of a bitch, or I'll kick it to smithereens. Charlie! Charlie!" Thump, 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 thump. Clyde was so enraged that when he spotted a terracotta pot sitting on the veranda to his far right, he made for it, his intention to pick it up and hurl it through the window to what he knew was the lounge room, a couple of metres to the left of the front door. But in the handful of seconds it took him to reach the pot, his rage had subsided enough that common sense and reason came to the fore, and he realised that resorting to such drastic actions wasn't the way to go, and there must be an alternative. The front screen door was locked, but what about the back door? It was worth a try. But when he turned round he noticed the one thing that would put an end to the noise in an instant. The meter box mounted to the wing wall of the far end of the veranda. 10 seconds later the sound of the silence was only interrupted by the distant sound of cheers and clapping hands, and Clyde bowed to his audience sight unseen by the side hedging. Then Clyde waited for Charlie to make an appearance, but how long that might be before the moron realised the power was off was anybody's guess. Clyde guessed 3 minutes. He was wrong, and it pissed him off. "What is taking an idiot so long?" he muttered as he paced back and forth, hands clasped behind his back. Clyde was a patient man when it came to most things, but waiting for someone wasn't one of them. "To hell with this," he said as he drew level with the front door. "You all right in there, Charlie?" he yelled, rapping the knuckles of a hand on the door. Nothing. Clenching the hand into a fist, he thudded as he yelled, "Come on, Charlie, open this bloody door, will you?" When the door finally opened, the first thing Clyde saw was Charlie's cat Samantha, quickly followed by the appearance of Charlie's face as he peered out from behind the partly open door, as if he was expecting an unwelcome visitor intent on physical harm. "Oh, it's you, Clyde. Was that you bashing on the door just now?" "Of course it was me, you imbecile," Clyde was thinking, but replied, "Yes, Charlie, it was me." "Please, Clyde, don't yell. I'm wearing my hearing aid in case you haven't noticed." "You fucking patronising son of a bitch," flashed across Clyde's mind like a neon sign. By God, how he wanted to punch the shithead right between the eyes at that moment. But he remained calm. "Do you realise how loud that home cinema of yours was, Charlie?" Yes, well, sorry about that." but I became confused and couldn't remember how to turn down the sound. Then it stopped all of a sudden and I couldn't figure out what had happened. Jesus H. Christ, Clyde thought, if I had a gun I'd put this miserable wretch down. It stopped because I turned the power off. What'd you do that for? Charlie asked with a hint of rancour. Take it easy, Clyde. Relax and take it easy. Because the entire population of the street were up in arms because of that infernal noise of yours. That's why. Charlie's face turned a light shade of scarlet that highlighted the white aging spots that were barely recognisable a moment before. And for that moment and the next, Clyde was in fear that he might have a heart attack. But when the moments passed and he didn't, Clyde breathed a silent sigh of relief. Although, if the truth be known, he was thinking along different lines. I'm sorry, Clyde, Charlie said, lowering his head. I didn't mean to upset people, did I, Samantha? Samantha looked up at Master's face and made a soft mewing sound as if to answer him, purring then as she ran the length of one side against his lower leg, turning and doing likewise with the other side, continuing on an alternation, and Clyde couldn't help but smile at her antics. I know you didn't, Charlie, Clyde said, although he damn well knew he did. But for the sake of harmony, please, don't do it again, eh? Charlie nodded and said, I won't, Clyde. I promise. In fact, I'll buy a set of headphones and leave them plugged in so I can't help but keep the noise down. That'd be good, Charlie. Real good. Clyde said, but if you do it again, I just might have to kill you, he was thinking. Anyhow, Charlie, now that that's settled, I'll be off. Clyde was away before Charlie had a chance to say anything, knowing full well that he hadn't restored the power to the house before leaving. He didn't care, but the stupid prick figured it out for himself. Back in his backyard, Clyde started the ball pump without hesitation, attached a fresh bottle of weed and feed to the hose, and continued on with what he'd been doing before the interruption. By the time he finished the front lawn and returned to the house for a much-deserved mug of tea, it was 3 o'clock, and once again he was at a loss as to what to do, and he began to feel edgy because of it. Picking up the packet of valerian tablets that had been biding its time next to the bottle of Mega B on the kitchen table, he began to read the instructions, paying particular attention to the recommended dosage. Take 2 an hour before bedtime. He had little faith in alternative medicine and doubted that they would be beneficial. So what harm could one capsule do in this, his time of need? Probably nothing, but possibly a little something to ease the itch, so to speak. And besides, what did he have to lose? And if by chance he dozed, no harm would be done. Releasing the oblong salmon-pink tablet from the foil onto a palm of a hand, he was instantly assaulted by a pungent smell the likes of which was akin to that of a felt pen. And he found it a little off-putting. Nevertheless, he took in a small amount of tea, then popped the tablet into his mouth, then tilted his head back and swallowed. The tablet gone in an instant, but the taste, that of the smell, lingering. Some things were like that. The taste of seafood, like the smell of the ocean, was one. Or maybe it only seemed that way to Clyde. Unfortunately, Clyde is one of those individuals who expects over-the-counter medications to show some beneficial sign within 10 to 20 minutes, like it is with a couple of paracetamol tablets. Take 2 of those for a headache and they work their magic in no time at all. But half an hour after taking the first valerian tablet, he wasn't feeling the slightest nuance of relief, so he decided to take another one. An hour later he still didn't notice any difference to his ever-increasing state of agitation. So nothing ventured, nothing gained, and in for a penny, in for a pound, he swallowed 2 more tablets. Oh well, I want to thank you for watching and listening, or just listening with your eyes closed. And until next time, bye for now.